Hello, my name's Justin LeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about Penelope Spheeris, director of Wayne's World, Little Rascals, The Beverly Hillbillies.
Senseless with David Spade.
But probably most famously,
The Kid and I with Tom Arnold.
She directed the Decline of Western Civilization trilogy, which is the first one about punk films, second one, The Metal Years, about heavy metal, and the third one about gutter punks.
Now, I think we're kind of interested in Penelope Spheeris because she has this weirdly bifurcated career. Mm-hmm. She's the director of this trilogy of documentaries that are, you know, some of the most beloved documentaries ever made. Is that too much of an overstatement?
No, I don't think so.
They're beloved by the people who beloved them, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think they actually impacted the music scenes that they documented because, like, think of the metal years. That defined what heavy metal was to people who maybe were, like, on the outskirts of it or maybe didn't understand it completely.
And then there was this period in the 90s when she was an A-list comedy director with diminishing returns, I would say. But Wayne's World was the key one, and it was a cultural phenomenon at the time.
And there's articles that, you know, the headline is like, Penelope Spheeris says, I sold out.
Yeah, so, and that was the question that I had revisiting her films this week, because a recurring theme in both the documentaries and even some of the comedy films is the idea of selling out. Mm-hmm. Wayne Campbell is very concerned with selling out. The people in Decline Part 1 are always talking about living authentically and not wanting to go get an office job. And yet she directed the Beverly Hillbillies.
Like, you could not sell out more than she did.
And I mean, I don't think it's a sin to take a job for the money. I mean, if it was a sin, I would be in hell right now. But at the same time, somebody who's that interested in it as a you know, artistic preoccupation, you've got to wonder, what does she make of her own career?
She said publicly that she took those jobs because, one, she was a woman working in the industry and there just wasn't any jobs for her anywhere. And that it was so competitive and that the chance to direct such a big budget project like Wayne's World was something that was not going to come along every day.
And easy to forget in the case of the Beverly Hillbillies. I mean, that movie's a bit of a joke, but I mean, when it was being made, that was positioned as this is going to be like a big blockbuster Christmas release.
I saw so many trailers for the Beverly Hillbillies. Every time Grandma got knocked off the car and she hit the ground, belly laughs for me.
That was an A-level Christmas release that was supposed to make $100 million. So it's not a bad gig for a director to
man,
get.
I must have seen The Little Rascals in theaters too. I saw like all of her filmography except for Wayne's World, which I only saw in my adulthood. But let's jump back a little bit because Penelope Spheeris, you know, she started from nothing pretty much. Like when she talks about her past, she talks about how she was like carny folk.
Okay, yeah.
And that she ended up going to film school. On her IMDb, and I found a few articles about this, one of her first student films was something that starred Richard Pryor, which was called Uncle Tom's Fairy Tales. And it has never been released. It's been locked up in a vault. And when it did screen briefly at a kind of celebration of Richard Pryor's film career in 2005, Richard Pryor's widow and his daughter accused Penelope Spheeris of stealing the film from Pryor's home to show at that event.
Okay, so I've got two questions about this. First, how did she hook up with Richard
Pryor? I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Secondly, what was this movie about?
So according to the IMDb, the summary is a white man goes on trial for having raped a black woman. So, like,
I want to see this movie.
I would love to see
Penelope
this.
Spheeris directing Richard Pryor in a movie with that premise. Could be very interesting.
Especially, like, at her punk rockiest, like, coming out of film school with something to prove. And to be able to do that movie, like, how did that come about? I have no idea. But if someone has this movie, show us. But considering that, like, litigation comes out just by screening some clips, I doubt it's out there. It's funny that we're talking again about movies that have been suppressed, and it's like, oh, when we do African-American filmmakers, their film have been suppressed. When we do women filmmakers, their films have been suppressed.
Well, with the Decline of Western Civilization trilogy, those movies were unavailable on home video except in bootlegs for many, many years. I think partly it was because of music rights.
And also, Penelope Spheeris said that she just didn't really have that much of an interest in putting it out. I read an interview with her when the third one was coming out. She couldn't get any distribution for it. She essentially had to do it all herself and pay for it all herself. And she talks about how she owns the rights and she wants to put them on VHS and DVD, but it's just so much work. And, you know, in interviews when the film finally did hit Blu-ray, which happened, I think, 1 or 2 years ago, she said again, it was so much work to get this out there.
I mean, I remember hearing about Part 2 for the first time because it was on Entertainment Weekly's list list of the top 50 cult films of all time. I think it was like number 48 or 49 or something, and that was, 2004 or something. There was another movie on that list, Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, where those were the two movies on the list that people traded on bootleg VHS tapes. And I think that was very key to their appeal, Like there was something, it's like the cinematic equivalent of a photocopied zine.
And I think there's power to that, like that kind of handmade quality, that kind of bootlegged, like Knight's Generation, especially because of the subject matter, which is all like this punk music, people doing it for themselves, people that when they started couldn't even play instruments, but they felt they needed to express themselves in some way, so they just went out there and did it.
So Decline Part 1 was, as you said, about the burgeoning punk scene, and this was a movie that posed more of a challenge for me than the other two, because
you're a straight-laced guy who doesn't understand breaking any rules.
Yeah, clearly. Well, I mean, this is not my kind of music, and there's a lot of this music in it.
Yes.
And a lot of the performances in it. So, I mean, I think it's an excellent film objectively. It's an incredible document of this period, and the concert footage she gets where like riots break out and people storm the stage is unbelievable.
Well, it's so raw, and she's right there. Like, you never feel any distance between her and her subjects. She likes these people. She wants to know about them. She's not like a scientist going down and like, how does this work? She's actually involved in their world, and I think that's what separates this documentary versus other stuff about this kind of scene.
And you're watching it thinking, how did the camera not get knocked over? Maybe it did. Who
Probably
knows?
A bunch of times it just didn't make it into the movie.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of difficulty with this one only because, like you, it's not really my type of thing. And I actually watched them back in a weird order. I watched the second one, I watched the third one, and then I watched the first one. And her like style of how she tells a story evolves so much between like 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. And the first one, she seems so enraptured with this music, like she tends to let it play. Like you'll see 1 or 2 songs in their entirety.
There are big tonal differences between the three films. So the first one, I wouldn't exactly call it a romantic depiction of the punk subculture, but it's certainly sympathetic.
Even though it is warts and all, like the homophobia and the kind of sexism is right out there in the open.
But she's very sympathetic with these young, kind of confused, anxious and angry kids who want to escape this, suburban drudgery. And they're out there making this music despite making no money out of it. Like they lose money doing this music, but they just have to do it.
And what's funny is that like a lot of the bands she does document did go on to do like bigger and better things.
Black Flag is one of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think what was the most powerful for me in this first documentary was like just them sitting and talking about it. While you do get those like in the chaos moments, like the fans talking about it, she starts to pioneer the editing and shooting scheme that you would have throughout these films, which is like one bare light bulb hanging beside the person talking. And there's a segment that comes about 3/4 into the movie where it's just like a bunch of fans talking about the music, what it means to them, and like why they adopt it as a lifestyle. And like that's very powerful for me. And in the second and third one, she kind of expands those ideas throughout the film.
Now, the second one, which is about heavy metal, and I believe it was made in 1988, so, a full 8 or 9 years after the first one, she is affectionate towards the subjects of the film.
But she knows they're a joke.
And she knows they're a joke. And also, there's a much broader range of subjects. So you have very, very famous people like Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons of Kiss.
Paul Stanley in the most ridiculous, like, interview position ever filmed.
Yeah. And Gene Simmons, who is one of the worst men who ever lived.
Oh, he's awful. What a monster of a human being.
But there's also, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, Lemmy. Lots of famous people you've heard of.
And a lot of them are speaking very honestly, or speaking in a way that makes them look like the doofuses that they are. Like even Steven Tyler is just talking honestly about like, oh, I made millions of dollars. And you hear Penelope Spheeris off camera go like, where is it now? And he's like, oh, it went up my nose.
Well, Steven Tyler and Ozzy Osbourne are two who are both a little ridiculous, but they also have like been at this long enough that they have like a certain amount of wisdom.
It's like Alice Cooper as well, who's like sitting on the stage covered in makeup and speaking just very matter-of-fact about the career and like why he does the things that he does.
But in addition to all these superstars, there are all of these other wannabes and also rands.
Odin!
Okay, Odin. Now, Odin is, I think, the band that everyone remembers. We see them being interviewed in a hot tub surrounded by groupies.
Which was the director's hot tub behind her house.
Okay, interesting. These guys were a semi-big deal in like a neighborhood of Los Angeles. The Sunset Strip, basically.
I mean, obviously when you see a documentary documentary like this, you go online and be like, where are they now?
Yes.
And like the guys from Odin were like, we were basically broken up by the time we recorded that documentary.
Okay, but in the documentary, they are so confident and cocky.
Boastful.
They're
and
like, you know what? We want to be bigger than the Beatles, and we're gonna be. Like you are gonna hear about us.
And the women that are on their shoulders are just like laughing and like, tee-hee.
And it's not just the benefit of hindsight. You see Odin perform in this documentary, and their gimmick is that they have assless pants. And
they're going to ride that all the way to the top.
Yeah, and obviously this is supposed to be some sort of transgressive gesture, but it doesn't work. It looks, frankly, like it's supposed to be homoerotic, but it's not.
I mean,
you know?
That's where she's so good at doing that, like, compare and contrast between, like, people that are really successful, like Poison, versus, like, Odin or the other kind of heavy metal gigs and bands that play.
And you think, okay, why Kiss and why not Odin? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, to some extent it's luck, and to some extent Odin could never be successful. It's just not there.
Yeah.
And also okay, Kiss is in it for the wrong reasons too, but Odin is definitely in it for the wrong reasons. They want to be famous, they want to be rich, and they want groupies. And actually, we should talk about that a bit, because the fact that Penelope Spheeris is a woman makes a huge difference in these movies, because we hear her interviewing these people.
Yeah, she's so present in these documentaries, and she's not like the polite kind of, oh, I want to be your friend and get these stories. She's often very aggressive in the way she's asking the questions.
I mean, if a man had made this documentary, there would probably be a bit more of a like high-fiving, oh, isn't this lifestyle cool? Whereas with her, there's a bit of a sense of like, I'm your patient mother asking you about...
You think that's what it is?
Well, maybe not patient mother, or I'm your patient school teacher. Like, she's a bit of a disciplinarian, or she's a bit of a, I don't know, like a cold audience for them, because she'll ask, how are the groupies? And these guys will be like, oh man, we love the groupies, as many as possible, four of them a day, whatever. And like...
She's like, why?
Yeah, exactly. Like she's not high-fiving them through
No.
it. And you can tell it's not quite the same.
But she genuinely likes this stuff, I think. She loves the punk stuff. She loves that transgressiveness. Now when it comes to heavy metal stuff, I'm sure she liked it as well, but it is that kind of corruption, that kind of selling out to the punk ethos. It's taking these punk ideas and making them for mass consumption.
And everyone wants to be super famous. Everyone wants to be rich. And there's that montage where she asks, okay, what if you don't become rich?
It's never going to happen.
Yeah, of course I'm going to make it. Of course I'm going to make it. And if I say I won't make it, then that means I won't make it. You just have to be positive. And they sound kind of like they're at a Tony Robbins type guru self-help thing, like power of positive thinking. And you can tell that doesn't quite mesh with her philosophy.
But at the same time, you do get the fans of heavy metal, and it is that kind of outgrowth of punk, because they don't look like normal people, and it genuinely means something for them to be involved in the scene, to be an outsider to what regular society likes. It's just heavy metal is popular and goofy and big. And I think that the best thing about Decline of Western Civilization Part 2 is that it's so funny as well.
Yeah.
It's laugh out loud, oh my god, these people, even though that some of them you like, some of them you think they're terrible. Gene Simmons.
Yeah. But Gene Simmons is so himself.
Oh man, there's a scene where I guess she set it up where they're in a lingerie store and Gene Simmons being interviewed, and there's women walking around looking at tops and stuff like that, and one walks by him and he looks over, he's like, woo, and he whistles. Ugh.
Yeah, but there's also kind of no way to depict him flatteringly. It's he is so himself. He is so uncompromisingly Gene Simmons that I'm sure he probably would not object to the way that he was shown in the movie.
So while we skipped over some of the feature films that she made between Decline 1 and 2, she made Suburbia, which I think is one of her strongest fictional films.
And I've seen that, but just not recently. That was a film that she made for Roger Corman's
she did.
New Concorde.
And it's almost Bressonian in its storytelling, and the fact that she cast all non-actors to play Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is in it as a guy who loves his rat and other animals, and it's really about kids that leave home because they have a terrible life, usually teenagers, and
suburban kids.
Yeah, suburban kids, and they hook up with other kids, essentially in this punk scene, and they just live in the gutters. A subject that you would tackle in a documentary, Decline Part 3.
And by the way, Suburbia, I think, is probably the most upsetting film I've seen from the Roger Corman assembly line.
Well, he didn't usually make movies like this, right? And you can almost feel her fighting against the rules that he would apply, oh, we need to see breasts in these movies. There's a scene at the beginning where a woman gets assaulted by a bunch of punks at a concert where they rip off all her clothes. And so you get those breasts, and I'm sure that's what Roger Corman wanted, but it's in such like a distasteful, horrible way that's also characterizing these people, right? Because like there's an idea of like, living on the streets, living on your own, it's like living the good life, but Spheeris shows you the good and the really bad at the same time.
There's also that horrible opening scene where a baby is mauled by a vicious dog.
Or the ending, which is also really brutal.
Incredibly bleak, yeah. It's a good film.
Yeah, it is super bleak, and it is essentially like, in any other situation, if it had been released like by like a mini company, it would have much more acclaim than it does. But let's be honest, it wouldn't have been made the way that it was if it was made by another company. It's these kind of Corman rules. You wish more movies like this kind of came out of it, like someone just went for it. But Penelope Spheeris is one of those people. Yeah, Suburbia, and it's really well loved too. Shell Factory put out like a 2-disc special edition when they were doing all the Corman films, and I would highly recommend to check it out. She also did like The Boys Next Door. She did Hollywood Vice Squad with Carrie Fisher, Dudes, which recently got a release on Blu-ray. All of them like involved in this idea of like punk music. Like it's an ethos that she brought in all of her films, whether it just be like subtext or literal text like it is in Dudes, where it's two punks go out to the desert and one of their friends gets killed and they decide to take revenge on the hillbillies who did it. So it becomes kind of like a neo-Western comedy thing.
Now, I want to get to Decline 3 eventually, but between Decline 2 and 3, she became a comedy director.
Yep. The big comedy director with Wayne's World in 1992. Now, we should point out that she got her start producing the shorts that Albert Brooks made at the first few episodes of Saturday Night Live. That's where she got started, and she essentially said that Albert Brooks knew nothing about like the technical parts of making movies. She helped him out with that, and he kind of introduced her to the LA scene, which he knew and she had no idea about, and she continued to hate like to this day, according to recent interviews.
Those Albert Brooks short films for SNL, by the way, have you ever seen any of them?
Yeah, I have.
I mean, they're
not hilarious, but they're so weird.
Yeah, they are weird, and they got more and more ambitious as they went along, and you can tell why Lorne Michaels didn't want to have him on anymore, because he would send these short films that were like 11 minutes long. It was like, you cannot cut them.
Yep. And Wayne's World, you know.
Speaking of Saturday Night Live.
I didn't grow up with Mike Myers in the Wayne's World character. I never saw the Wayne's World movies. I don't know how that happened. I guess I had very strict parents about what I could or could not watch as kids. I remember people on the playground talking about this, and they sounded like the most funny, like, out there movies I could possibly see.
I saw it once or twice as a kid. Liked it as a kid.
Did you like the Mike Myers Wayne's World segments on Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, I would see SNL reruns after school, and I liked those segments. And also, like, Mike Myers was a pretty huge comedy star at that time, so, like, there was something in the air that made everyone regard him as funny. And
you can probably tell where we're leading here, because when I started dating Emily, my partner of many, many years, one of the first things we did was watch Wayne's World, because she was like, oh my god, I can't believe you haven't seen this. And so we watched it, and it was one of those terrible moments where she's like, you watch a movie with someone, and now I'm on the other side of it, where I'm like, wow, this is not funny.
Yeah.
And just you could tell she was like deflating as it like went along, and she's like, what, you don't find this funny? Like, this is she knew the movie by heart. She dressed up in a Halloween costume as like Wayne and Garth with friends, and I was just sitting there being like, I don't know, I don't get it.
You know, it's funny, I watched it this time fully expecting to laugh.
I watched it again being like, you know what, maybe I was in the wrong place
because
when I saw
there are certain jokes you remember from Wayne's World, and you think, oh yeah, that's a funny joke. I bet that whole movie's really funny. I should revisit that sometime. And I don't know if it's context or what. I was pretty stone-faced watching it this time.
I was with it for like the first 20 minutes.
Okay.
Where I was like, okay, this weird, lame comedy thing, they obviously are aware of what they're doing.
Okay, I know a certain amount of suspension of disbelief is required for comedy films. The first stumbling block is that Wayne and Garth are like 35 years old and they're teenagers. So, there's a certain amount, like, kabuki element to the presentation.
That doesn't really bother me.
Yeah, okay.
The big stumbling block is that every joke is Mike Myers kind of saying a catchphrase, staring into the camera, winking, and it holding like 1 or 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's like a Marx Brothers movie where they took
went
it on the
tour,
road and they knew where the laughs were. Except imagine if Groucho looked at the camera and then did a little thumbs up and winked. Mike Myers does that in all his movies.
That's like a Mike Myers signature. I would say Dana Carvey's much funnier than Mike Myers is in this film.
Actually, yeah, you're right.
And he doesn't have much to do.
And I have a feeling that probably has something to do with Mike's ego, because Mike wrote this script. I know, shocker, right?
Yeah.
And I think Mike Myers is probably like, let's give this other asshole as little as possible to do and give me lots and lots and lots to do.
Well, Penelope Spheeris talks to this day how difficult the set was. She had made movies before. She had made like a bunch of feature films, but they were essentially like Corman Productions or other lower budget films. And this was like a big, like million crew thing. And she said it was almost impossible to deal with because you have Mike Myers, who I assume at this point he didn't have like the giant ego he would have later on, but reading IMDb and some interviews that she's done, at one point Mike Myers at the craft service table realized that like they only had margarine or they didn't have butter, and he flipped the table into the air. That's insane.
Was he like this on SNL?
I can't imagine he was.
I mean, that's a show that's hard to make, and that like you can't have a Titanic ego like that flipping over tables at Studio AH.
Well, Spheeris says that like SNL fostered a community where everyone was fighting each other and trying to one up each other. So maybe Mike Myers is just like that big of an ego that like that's how he succeeded as long as he did.
Also, by the way, Dana Carvey was the star of SNL for a couple years.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was a huge star on that show. So, I mean, I would imagine that Mike Myers was probably resentful of him and probably wanted to put him in his place by giving him such a shitty role.
And, you know, it's not even Myers. It's like this movie, it seems to have been written into the ground. Like, Spheeris talks about how they did like 14 drafts of the screenplay.
Well, okay, so only the finest quality jokes were picked. Like that joke where Mike Myers opens the door and he sees a bunch of army guys training and he's like, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with anything. I just wanted to open a door and have it be like a Bond movie where there are people training.
What Bond movie is he talking about?
I know. And a gag like that is kind of a Zucker type gag.
Oh, no. It's really a Seltzman.
Yeah. And also, this movie doesn't have the pace of a Zucker movie.
It's so slow. Yeah. Like, 5 minutes will pass and like the only thing you'll have to hold on to is like Mike Myers in his underwear.
Oh my god. Brutal. Okay, or there's that scene where he's talking with Tia Carrera in Cantonese, and the joke is that Mike can speak really well in Cantonese, and it just goes on and on and on.
And at the end he just says one word and the subtitle's really long, and then he looks in the camera and he's like, and no one can see me like shrugging my shoulders.
A gag that he used again, by the way, in I think Goldmember.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such an odd film as well because there's no stakes.
No.
The stakes are Mike Myers is threatened by Rob Lowe, who's not even that bad in the movie. Like, for a film that's about selling out, the selling out that happens is that they get a big crew to do their show, and they recreate the whole basement, which is a funny idea, and they have to call it, like, Someone's Arcade Presents Wayne's World, and then someone comes on and talks for a minute and a half at the beginning of the show, and then they can, assumingly, do whatever they want.
Also, a problem with the stakes of the movie is that Wayne never really seems tempted to sell out. Like, on that first episode, when he has the video arcade mogul come on and he makes fun of him on air, like, there should be, I think, you know, a 10 or 15 minute stretch of the movie where he's sort of tempted by the high life.
And, like, he needs to sell out to the point that, like, you know,
he realizes what he's giving up.
Yeah, and what he's doing is so bad and not what Wayne's World is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to rewrite Wayne's World.
I think you'll agree that the Mike Myers Tia Carrera romance it just burns up the screen.
I mean, there's nothing better than a movie about a jealous boyfriend who doesn't want her talking to any other men.
How about that gag where it turns out Alice Cooper is really smart?
And it goes on and on and on.
Anyway, sorry, I'm sure many people listening to this
throw in their iPod.
People love Wayne's World, and that's great. I mean, I watch this and I watch any of the Austin Powers movies, and I just think, like, what was
in the air?
What mass hypnosis happened?
We should say that, like, we loved Austin Powers when it came out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we loved it.
Doing all the catchphrases.
And now you watch those movies and you're like, grown people put this together?
So, Spheeris and Myers were battling every day on set. You told me an interesting thing about the Queen song.
Yeah, which was that Spheeris read the script and went, well, they wouldn't be listening to Bohemian Bohemian Rhapsody, they're heavy metal guys. So they'd be listening to something like AC/DC in the car and kind of headbanging to it. And Myers was like, no, this is a song that I listened to with my parents when I was a kid. So that's why I wanted it in the movie. And I mean, that scene is iconic.
Yeah.
And Spheeris has admitted, like, I was wrong in that situation.
Yeah.
And that
I'm not sure if she was, though.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
as far as characters go, it does make more sense what she said. But again, it's like, she had no power in the situation. The fact that she was able to finish the movie is, I think, amazing. And it became such a huge hit. And she was not asked back for Wayne's World 2. Yeah, again, like, the smog in the air.
People still love it.
They love it. I mean, when I was talking about it with Emily, she's like, oh, there's a commentary with Spheeris on the DVD, which I listened to. And she's like, I listened to this 100 times. But I think it also makes a difference that, like, Emily, she could look at someone like Penelope Spheeris and see a woman make a successful studio comedy.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Which is not something that happens very often.
I'm curious, do you sense any, like, Decline Part 2 spirit in Wayne's World?
No.
Like, does she regard these two guys with any sort of distance?
I don't think so.
know?
I think that she still, in Decline, has a kind of empathy for, like, the goofballs in the movie, while she can be kind of, like, direct with them. The problem with Wayne's World is that, like, especially Mike Myers, is a huge asshole.
Yeah, you're right. I am not at all sympathetic with Wayne in this movie.
Who's living in his fucking parents' basement and gets handed a show, and then he's just a jackass about it and a jealous asshole.
I mean, the one thing he has to do to compromise his principles is read a sponsor message.
yeah, at the beginning.
Although, you know what,
This podcast is brought to you by Casper Mattresses.
we're from a different generation, a generation that doesn't care about selling out because
we want money and
yeah.
we can't get real jobs.
Exactly. So this movie brought Penelope Spheeris the job directing, again, the blockbuster of fall 1993, The Beverly Hillbillies. Yeah, a movie that I watched a lot as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Well, for one reason.
Mr. Jim Varney.
And man, does he sell his character. He is the glue that holds this film together. Anytime he's on screen, I'm like, yes, Jim Varney.
Well, what Beverly Hillbillies and Wayne's World have in common is that they're kind of lame and not funny. But one difference they have, and I don't necessarily think Beverly Hillbillies is better than Wayne's World, but a difference they have is...
I'd rather watch Beverly Hillbillies again than Wayne's World.
Yes.
I'm going to say it because,
Okay.
like, Wayne's World, I don't like these characters, and at least I have Jim Varney doing a scene where he's like, I miss your mother every day, and I see her in your eyes.
So I think all four of the actors... Jim Varney as Jed Clampett, Erica Eleniak as Ellie Mae, Cloris Leachman as Granny, and Diedrich Bader as, whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Jethro.
Jethro.
I think all four of them do a good job in this movie and sell it and are very likable.
Well, yeah, they're the empathetic, naive characters. That's the problem with Wayne's World, is that Mike Myers is not naive.
He's too smart.
He's too smart, and he knows what's going on. So he's just acting like a dumbass to make people look like fools.
Wayne's World has a bit of that, like, obnoxious 90s thing, that kind of Pulp Fiction thing of, we're self-aware and meta.
Boo!
Yeah, fuck that shit.
No, there's nothing like that in Beverly Hillbillies. Beverly Hillbillies also has a stacked cast as well.
Oh, the supporting cast, Dabney Coleman, Lily Tomlin, Dolly Parton is in it.
Crazy.
Rob Schneider.
Even, like, Leah Thompson from the Back to the Future films.
Right, and lots of cameos, like Buddy Ebsen, who, of course, was on the original show, appears as his other iconic character, Barnaby Jones. Zsa Zsa Gabor has a cameo. timeless joke.
I mean, there's not really that much to say about the Beverly Hillbillies.
Okay, so here's the plot. It's the story of a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed.
Yep.
Then one day, he gets rich, they go to Beverly Hills, and what do you want? It's the pilot episode of a TV show.
I got to write it onto my list of shows where naive dum-dums think that giving the middle finger is a greeting of some kind. So I was able to add Bean, the ultimate disaster movie. And somebody pointed out a third one. I don't remember what it is now.
Yeah, but it's the exact same joke in both movies.
Yep.
And the plot also involves, so Dabney Coleman is the head of the bank, and of course he's got this new billionaire at his bank, so he wants to do anything he can to please him. And Jed Clampett wants to have a wife so that his daughter Ellie Mae can grow up and be a sophisticated woman. And Rob Schneider and Leah Thompson play this conniving couple who are going to bilk him out of his money.
It's a real Addams Family.
Yeah. and then the shenanigans. So that's the
You
plot.
keep going into the plot as if I'm going to jump in and say more about the movie. I'm all tapped out, man.
Okay, but mostly it's a clothesline for jokes about what would happen if yokels were in a mansion, which of course is what the original TV show was as well.
Yeah.
Just I don't know how long it lasted. 10 seasons of yokels in a mansion.
You think the screenwriter like watched like all the episodes? Like, I got to give the ultimate version of this.
Well, maybe he watched all the episodes to be like, what are all the best jokes?
Yeah.
But there were also kind of a lot of topical jokes in this film.
Oh, well, I mean, as a comedy film, one of the biggest struggles is that like it's not even like edited particularly funny. There's a specific scene where Rob Schneider gets up and does a bunch of slapstick that's undercut by really weird cutting. I don't know if you remember the scene. He like gets up to go to Dabney Coleman's office and he like bumps into someone.
And he's got a big jug of water.
Yeah, but it keeps cutting back to like Dabney Coleman like reacting to it, undercutting the slapstick. Yeah. And it's like, this is just not even funny.
Yeah, but there is Jim Varney acting the hell out of it, giving the emotional core of
like
movie.
A Shakespearean drama.
I mean, Jim Varney really plays it straight, and he has a lot of, I think, he brings dignity to the role.
It's one of the rare, like, studio, non-earnest things that Jim Varney was able to do.
And I understand that Spheeris had to fight for him to be in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Hollywood failed Jim Varney.
The studio was just like, no, he's earnest. Don't put him in your movie.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But she had that Wayne's World clout, I guess.
I mean, you look at, like, Jim Varney in that movie, you don't even think of Ernest other than him looking like him because he's not acting like Ernest or any of that stuff. So
he's very good. And then there was The Little Rascals, of course, which we did not revisit for the podcast, although it does feature a cameo by 45 himself, Donald Trump.
Oh, does it?
You remember how in The Little Rascals...
I do not remember The Little Rascal, even though I saw it theatrically on 35 millimeter.
Listeners, you remember how in The Little Rascals there's that mean rich kid who is vying for Darlene's affections with Alfalfa. Well, the mean rich kid's dad is Donald Trump. And at one point, he's on the phone with Donald, and Donald says, "You're the best kid that money can buy."
I was more of a blank check and Richie Rich kind of guy.
Yeah, I'll say this for Spheeris, too. I mean, imagine how hard it would be to direct The Little Rascals, marshalling all those kids.
Ugh, what a nightmare. And that dog?
Oh, my God.
Obviously, like, she took these jobs because it would give her money. And she said that multiple times, you know? Where, like, she had a daughter she was raising. It was difficult. Where else was she going to get jobs that were going to pay well? I mean, after that, she made Black Sheep with...
Chris Farley and David Spade.
Which is always like... I'm like, is it Tommy Boy or Black Sheep? Which one came out first?
I think Tommy Boy is the well-regarded one.
Yeah, Black Sheep is the
Black Sheep of the canon.
But, like... After that, 1998, she made Decline Part 3, which I personally think is one of the most, like, emotional things that she's ever done.
Now, I'm coming to you apologetic because I watched the first half of this and ran out of time before doing this podcast. I will watch the rest of it later. I was very immersed in it while I was watching it, but you I guess can carry this part.
Yeah, so she said she started the documentary wanting to kind of document like the resurgence of punk, like from beyond heavy metal. And what she ended up discovering was that she was more interested in these fans who would watch these shows and what their lives were like, because essentially it's a documentary about the kids that were in suburbia, which she made in 1983, and this is like 1998, and it's all these kids that are living on the street, living in like abandoned buildings and going to these punk shows and defining themselves by this punk aesthetic, and they're living lives to the point that like a bunch of them die as the documentary is being filmed.
And I mean, compared to the first two, the tone is despairing. The first one is and the first two are much more fun, or there's a sense of kind of joy and discovery to them.
Well, there's just a sense of sadness in this one. There's a section where she talks to these kids and is like, why did you leave home? And they talk very honestly about being physically abused by their parents and how that made them into the people that they are. Like, the best thing about this documentary is that she got on the level with these kids, and they're able to open up in ways you would never imagine that, like, these, you know, really damaged people could. And it's just amazing to see on screen.
I'm impressed that she can do this, like, just from a journalistic point of view. I mean, it takes extraordinary skill when you're not in this peer group to go in and sort of relate to them, but also be an authority figure, you know?
There's some sequences near the end where she's, like, right in the thick of it, hanging out with them, recording on, like, a VHS camera as they're, like, getting ready, and they're having parties. And that's where you get, like, a sense of that she is not in this scene like she was in the first one. She's empathetic with these people, but I don't think they would consider her one of them, where she's like filming at a party and at one point she's like, shut the fuck up! Like, I'm trying to film here!
But, most of them are aware of the Decline movies.
Yes, and I think that's how she got like a foot into the door.
Yeah, and she's also somebody who was part of that scene at one point, so there's perhaps a perception that, okay, she's not one of us, but she could have been one of us at one time.
And she said that she was making those studio films to be able to make documentaries like Decline of Western Civilization Part 3. And I mean, that same year that film was released, she made the David Spade, Marlon Wayans comedy Senseless, which I've never seen, but I vividly remember the poster where I believe it was Marlon Wayans like holding out like a blue jar, like a test tube of something.
Yeah.
You never seen it? Ooh, I like that.
No, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the poster.
Brad Dourif is second build.
Nice. And I haven't seen The Kid and I, which I believe is her last theatrically released comedy
I'm
film.
shocked you haven't seen that. As a Tom Arnold super fan.
Oh, yeah, I love Tom Arnold.
After The Kid and I, she struggled to make any films after that. I like that in 1999, which is before The Kid and I, she was going to make a documentary about a band that Charles Band put in one of his movies called The Blood Dolls, and it just never took off, but there's like a little short of it that's like 5 minutes long called Holly Weird.
Holly Weird.
Yeah.
It's probably about those libs.
A little bit of Michael and Us magic coming out there. But she did make some movies. She made a TV movie, The Real Saint Nick, in 2012, and something called Balls to the Wall in 2011. These definitely feel like I have mortgages to pay films.
Now, when the Decline movies came out on Blu-ray recently, she was talking about possibly making another one. And I'm very curious what that would look like. I mean, would it be SoundCloud rappers? I mean, what is... In the first three, like, most of the people in them are white. Some of them are, frankly, racists.
Yes.
I'm interested in, would she still be interested in kind of like the white punk scene, and where would that lead her in the year 2018?
I have no idea, but I would love to see it, because those documentaries are so powerful, and even her fiction films like Suburbia are so powerful that I would love to see her just do something that she's really passionate about, because obviously she's not really that passionate about the Beverly Hillbillies, Black Sheep, or the Little Rascals. So it's like when she's behind something, that's when it's interesting. And I would be there like first day, ticket in hand, to see like the Decline of Western Civilization Part 4, whatever that may be.
And man, I've seen Decline 2 with an audience.
Oh, it kills.
So good. Yeah, it's a whole other movie when you see it with an audience.
Like, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen those docs, especially Part 2, you have to go watch it.
Yeah.
Go do it.
So, Justin, do we have any letters this week?
We do have a letter, and it's from... you know what? I won't say till we get to the end of it. It goes, "Hey guys, I came across your podcast episode today about my father, Gary Graver. This was an episode we did a few weeks ago on the cinematographer of Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind and many other pictures, mostly directed by Fertile Ray and Jim Wynorski and Al Adamson.
Highly recommend that episode, by the way. That's one of my favorite ones we've done."
And the letter continues, "It was flattering to hear how much time you spent reviewing his work and learning about his relationship with Orson. After spending the last 20 years of his life trying to get The Other Side of the Wind released, it's bittersweet to see it finally happen. We can now see why it was so important to him. It probably would have changed the trajectory of his career. Thanks for honoring him with praise and criticism. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Sean Graver."
Well, thank you, Sean. And we love Gary Graver.
We love Gary Graver. And I'm a little disappointed that I didn't see like more articles about Gary Graver come out in the wake of The Other Side of the Wind.
He's the real unsung hero.
Yeah, and I think that it'll probably come maybe in a few years when people like, now that they have this final piece of the puzzle, they can go back and like start to recontextualize his life and career. So this week on our Patreon, which you can become a subscriber of by going to www.patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club, we're tackling sequels, specifically 2 sequels, Creed 2 and 2.0, or Robot 2.0, which is a Indian movie that is a giant smash that me and Will saw in theaters together at the Indian cinema in the GTA, which is the Greater Toronto area.
So you want to hear about that?
Definitely. I mean, if you enjoyed us talking about Bahubali 2, then you're definitely going to want to listen to this. And there are no bigger Rocky fans than me and Will. Maybe Matthew Kumar, that's pretty much it.
There are probably bigger Rocky fans, but
we're big Rocky fans.
That's only because people love those movies.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that as well. So you can become a subscriber to listen to that episode. Again, it's patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. So next week, you don't know Jack. Who are we talking about, Will?
We're talking about Jack Nicholson.
An actor who... Has he done anything since The Departed?
He appeared in a movie called The Bucket List.
Oh, yes, that's
and also, How Do You Know?
Oh, that's right. The last James L. Brooks film. I say the last that James L. Brooks died.
Yeah, it's the last.
Did you see it?
I saw it in a theater, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think Jack Nicholson has a fascinating career. I mean, we talked about Dick Miller on our Patreon last week, and Jack Nicholson is the guy that was not Dick Miller and went on to a full career of leading roles, directing, doing all kinds of stuff, which is amazing because Jack Nicholson has like one mode.
We're going to be talking about my films, Going South.
No, we're not.
And Hoffa.
The Two Jakes. I can't do a Jack Nicholson. I'm surprised you didn't do like a Batman line.
I'm doing old Jack Nicholson. Oh, yeah, what's a good Batman line?
You don't know it by heart? Where?
I'm trying to think of like what's one that's suitably obscure.
You wouldn't hit a man with glasses.
If anyone else calls you beast, I'll rip their lungs out.
What? I don't remember that line.
There you go.
The deep cut. You could have just made it up. I don't know.
You are my number one guy.
So we're going to be watching Carnal Knowledge. And what do we decide on the
Anger Management?
Anger Management.
Yeah, let's watch Anger Management.
Yeah.
I'm going to regret this.
Were you a big Jack Nicholson fan, like back in the day, out of Batman?
Oh, certainly out of Batman, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, he was kind of like... He's one of those guys who was like one of the earliest ideas, this is what a movie star is, you know?
I mean, I'm definitely going to watch Wolf, which I've never seen.
Yeah, have fun with that.
Have you seen it?
I have seen Wolf.
I mean,
it's a bit of a slog.
My friend pitched it when he watched it a few Halloweens ago. He's like, James Spader and Jack Nicholson are having a wire foo fight as werewolves. Makes me excited to check it out. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. You can send us letters as well. I don't think I mentioned that.
Hey, Eckhart. Think about the future.
It's importantcinemaclubpodcast at gmail.com.
My Jack Nicholson impression is only getting worse, so we may as well sign off.
Yeah. You know what? You're going to have to go workshop it in the mirror. Get the facial looks perfect.
You know why my impression is bad?
Why?
Because Jack is dead. You can call me Joker.
All right. My name's Justin the Glue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Justin, did you get anything on Black Friday?
So, I went to the Vinegar Syndrome site, and then literally 30 minutes later, I went, I can't afford this. And at this point in time, I don't need it either. I have giant piles all over the place of stuff that I haven't watched. And I literally sent them an email and went, I would like to cancel my order.
And they canceled it?
Yeah, they did cancel it, yes.
Very, very nice.
I know.
That's a moment of maturity.
Yes,
I mean, so what happened? You clicked send, and then you were like, why don't I feel good?
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. I'm looking forward to those Sean Costello audio commentary tracks.
So, what's happening? Are you getting old?
No, I just don't have money.
Okay,
that's
fair
what
enough.
it is, yeah.
I'll tell you what I did. I went onto the Severin site, and I pre-ordered a movie called Skinner.
Oh, it's not good. I've seen it.
Okay,
yeah.
I know it's not good, but
Ted Raimi stars in it.
Ted Raimi stars in it.
Tracy Lords.
With Tracy Lords and Ricky Lake also. But what interests me in it, and I would like to do this perhaps as a Patreon episode at some point, because the director, Yvonne Naj, was Heidi Fleiss's ex-boyfriend and possibly her pimp.
He's interviewed on the Blu-ray, which shocked me. Yes, he is.
Okay, so there's a documentary by Nick Broomfield called Heidi Fleiss Hollywood Madam, where he is like one of the main characters in it, and he is so awful. Just one of the worst men.
Just monstrous.
Just an absolute monster. And I actually haven't seen Skinner.
Yeah.
I ordered it knowing that I'll love it. But
it's boring.
Yeah,
I watched it with a bunch of friends last year.
Okay, well,
you know what? If I had the money, would have bought it.
Okay, but what I know from
Severin, send me Blu-rays.
I know from watching Heidi Fleiss Hollywood Madam that the Tracy Lords character in Skinner is named Heidi.
Really?
So this is why I think at some point we should do a Patreon episode of Heidi Fleiss Hollywood Madam and Skinner. And it's the Yvonne Naj special.
I don't even know who Yvonne Naj is.
Well, Yvonne Naj's other major project, I mean, he did a lot of episodes of Starsky and Hutch.
Wait, who's Heidi? I don't even know who that is either.
Heidi Fleiss?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe this is before both of our times.
Yeah.
Heidi Fleiss was a famous madam of a Hollywood brothel that serviced many famous actors.
Okay.
I think the only name that really became public was Charlie Sheen.
Watching those guinea pig films.
So what,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But yeah, it was a big scandal for a brief period of time.
Oh my God, people paying for sex.
I know. It was a different time.
Yeah. Did you get anything else?
I also ordered from the Severin website some Mondo movies. Mondo,
that box set?
And yeah.
That was good, because I looked at that and I went, not for me. I'm not even tempted by that.
For me,
know,
though.
for you. Did you get anything from Vinegar Syndrome?
Yeah, I did. I got.
Why are you saying it sadly?
Well,
we love Vinegar Syndrome.
No, we love Vinegar Syndrome, but like I definitely do have that pang of, man, I'm spending some money. But you know what? That's why I make money.
Well, I hope that's why you sold out, as we covered in the earlier episode. Yeah, because I'm sticking to my principles. Give me the Little Rascals. I'll direct that. I have no problem. I mean, Vinegar Syndrome is just releasing so much good stuff. I mean, check out...
People probably think we're getting paid.
I know, we're not. Sudden Fury is a Canadian film that's great and is coming out, finally, it's never been released on VHS, in a Blu-ray with tons of special features. So I guess we're growing as people then. You have money to spend. I don't. The haves and the have-nots. Yes,
that's true. But also, so this is how we're growing. I have money.
Yes.
You have maturity.
That's right. So I will take money instead of maturity.
Out.
No, it doesn't.